Well, I want to welcome everybody tonight to come here a little bit more about Memorial Hall. Last week, when April 1st hit, we realized that it was 10 years since we had received a surprise from Memorial Hall that I'll talk about at the end. So we'd shared that in the paper and then decided, we'd go ahead and look at a little retrospective of what we have in our archives and collections that we can talk about Memorial Hall. But I'm hoping that everybody here can share their own memories. Going back through the stuff to find things to share, I realized that we have a lot of very big gaps in our collection as far as events that are covered. And you'll see that a little bit later on the slide when I show you our content list of what we have represented stops in about the 30s. So a lot of you that your memories of going to Memorial Hall are not necessarily represented in the archive. So we're hoping you can share that and that eventually some of that stuff will make its way to us. This is like our other Zoom experiences, this one is being recorded. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I can turn on our web transcript. So if you can see that to should auto transcribe. Maybe it's not doing it. Is it showing up on anybody's side?
I'm not seeing any captions, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Auto captions?
Yeah, it's not.
I don't see anything.
Enable auto transcription. Okay, it should. There we go.
There it is.
Okay, so now you'll be struggle through trying to talk on, and you can read it. But we're recording this, and we will have it up later for you to look back at. And I'm happy for people to jump in and share details. I tried to sort a lot of the details of Memorial Hall out using our archives, and there was some things that I was a little confused by because it's outside my memory, and I'm not from Springfield, so I don't really have memory of it. So there's some details that I wasn't sure about. So if you guys know anything or details to add, please jump in and add them. Then we'll have it as part of the recording. So you're welcome to unmute yourself as we go through. You can go in the chat if you've got questions. We'll try and pay attention to them and get to those. But you can also, jump in on certain slides when we have things that you would like to start with. So I thought I would go in chronological order as much as possible as far as what we have in our archives and collections. But I just wanted to start with one of my favorite postcards. We have a great postcard collection with lots of different views of different things in Springfield, but this is one of my favorites of Memorial Hall. And like a lot of postcards, I think there are some details that aren't quite the same as the actual living building. That you'll see differences between postcards and the buildings, but this is a pretty one that I like. So I thought I'd start out with this one. And then another good way to start is to talk a little bit about Memorial Halls in general. There was legislation that was enacted in 1902 by the Ohio General Assembly to encourage the construction of memorial buildings statewide, and municipalities could float bonds in order to obtain the money that was needed to construct these buildings. So Dayton opened their Memorial Hall in 1910. So this is it here, which it still stands. It's maintained by Dayton History, and they rent it out for events and things like that. It still stands in downtown Dayton. But once Dayton's open, people in Springfield said, we need to get one for our veterans. So we know that discussions for having a memorial hall here in Springfield began as early as 1909, 1910. This is the early 1910 papers. We start seeing some articles of people talking about it. This is a plan that they're talking about. They wanted to keep up with other growing cities in Ohio that were erecting halls and to serve and to honor the service of military veterans. And these would be event centers where they could have conventions and concerts and graduations and large gatherings. So they wanted to be like the other cities in Ohio and have this. So they started talking about it. And we have an article from a couple weeks later in March where the commercial club, which is now our Chamber of Commerce, appointed a committee to work with the Mitchell Post to get it on the ballot in the fall. So it was that year they had passed bonds to construct a memorial hall here in Springfield. So there was a lot of discussion over the next few years of where it would go. There was some back and forth of what the eventual location would be. There was lots of discussions on design. This is from, I believe, April 1912. This was a proposed design that was published in the paper of what Memorial Hall looked like. And you can see, comparing it to the actual Memorial Hall, that it did end up looking quite different than this. And the site that they eventually settled on already had a building on the site. As most places, you know, things will come down to make way for new things. This was the corner of Lowry and Main, which they had determined would be the location. And what stood there at the time was a sporting goods store and Sterling Shoe Repair Company, which was, I've researched this before, didn't get the exact build date of how long it had been there, but we know that that was the corner that it was on. We also know that George Netz, who I'll mention in just a minute, was born, I think, across the street on the other corner from here. And he ended up being instrumental in the building construction. So this was the site before Memorial Hall. These are some blueprints that we'd run across in our collection. We don't have necessarily all the blueprints, but this was one that we'd found a number of years ago. I tried to go back over the last few days to find the rest of it, but I had just grabbed a quick picture of some pieces of it. So that was all I had. So I'll have to go back and find the rest of those. So they worked on design, and I've seen in a couple, again, going through the stuff that we have in our archives, I've seen that the dates changed over the years. I think at one point it was wrongly stated that construction started in 1912. We found later other more succinct sources that show us that it did start in 1914. So this picture here, which was published much later in the Springfield paper, talks about the construction started in 1912, but we believe it was actually a couple years later. So we've got this picture here, and this one that we know is dated from February 14th, 1915. That shows the construction much further along, but not far enough along that it's been going on since 1912. So maybe ground had broken and the land was purchased, but I don't think that big bits of construction had not started as early as 1912. But eventually it was constructed at a cost of $262,000. And we've got some stuff here from the dedication of the building. And this is where George Netz comes back into play. We know a lot about Springfield's history from diaries that he kept from 1868 to 1933 that covered all sorts of things that happened in local life. And Denise is on here right now. Her family actually donated the diaries and transcribed them, which makes them amazing to search and be able to find things in them. So we know we could search the date, March 24th, 1915, which we know was the cornerstone laying. And we know that he was on the board of trustees that was working to build the Memorial Hall building. So he talks about it in his diary. So we found that entry for that day, along with that dedication program showing the architect was Frank Packard of Columbus, and the supervising architect and the contractors that also worked on that project. We've got a picture of George here, but he said that that day, March 25th, was cloudy all day, rained till noon. The memorial board met. Prince was sick, which that's Silas Prince. We got Presbyterian Church for cornerstone laying exercises should it continue to rain. In the afternoon, rain stopped, so we laid cornerstone and carried out program at site. I marched down with Kiefer, that's General J. Warren Kiefer, who was also on the committee. All okay at the building. Mama and I at the young women's, I think that's Christian Temperance reception. It's, he has an abbreviation here. She went home. I stayed at the club. Was at the lodge at Camp of Soldiers and an inspection of Clark Lodge. Came home in Adams Auto. Someone took my hat. I love all the little details that we get throughout his, but it's a nice little slice of life of someone who was there. And there's lots of details from the newspaper from that lane. Here's more from the program. Music was the Hawkins Cadet Band, which was has their roots in the Civil War. We have the Civil War drum here in our collection, and one of the trumpets from Hawkins, and he later had a music store in town. General J. Warren Keifer gave the address, and the GAR, they laid the cornerstone. We know that we had other addresses from Dr. Isaac Kay and James G. Johnson, who was a judge, who we also know that he was at the opening of the Springfield News Sun building years later. He was became a Supreme Court judge that was from Springfield. And I love this shot of the building that shows that it was erected by the people of Clark County in 1915. So that stands under those columns right at the entrance. So now we've got a couple more closer to that time period, a postcard and a undated photo that we have in the collection. The building. And this is just show you a little bit about the seating capacity. I know that this is very small, but this is about, I think it's 1513 here, and then in the balcony they could seat 578, and the second balcony could seat about 300 some. So the capacity was pretty large for the seating in there. And there was a wide variety of programs, which I'm hoping you guys can tell us more about all the different things that went on there and that you remember going to Memorial Hall for. We've got these, this is from the 1944-45 season at Memorial Hall, and encouraging people to get their season tickets so that they could get their good seats, just like the places still do today and are trying to do as we come back to have live shows again. We've got a good view here of the empty hall showing all of the seating, and a great view of the audience out here. Not sure what show they were at for this one, but this is one of our, could have been a meeting or something like that, or we don't have the information on that. We've got also in the collection an application for people to use the building, and I'm not sure with the time period of this one, but later we have information about the costs of what it took to rent for different events. But this was what people had to fill out if they wanted to use the building. And then we've got less than I'd like on things that came to be at Memorial Hall. So we've got John Philip Sousa here. We know that he came in 1923, but we're not entirely sure the date of this photo. We don't know if he came more than once, but he's here with child actor Jackie Coogan. Another picture we have is this one's from 1955, showing students from the county that were gathered outside the hall waiting for a Springfield Symphony Orchestra show, which is something that's still a long time tradition, that the Springfield Symphony Orchestra will play shows for matinee shows for children that are brought in by bus. And I talked to one of our volunteers the other day when I was working on this, and he said those are his memories of Memorial Hall, was always coming for school programs, and that he never actually came as an adult or with his parents or anybody else except for with school. So we know that a lot of people, that was a regular school tradition to come for events. And we know that the Springfield Symphony Orchestra started playing there in 1946, and that was their home until it closed in 1985. And they moved afterwards for a while to Springfield North High's auditorium for the Coast opened later. But this just shows a wide variety of the different things that were here. This is a 1930s photo showing Ohio Bell employees that were there, that had rented the space, probably for a banquet. We have the picture of them all outside. But then here's a banquet inside from 1927, showing the ladies of the Order of the Eastern Star, the women's auxiliary to the Masonic Order. And this is their banquet setup, so you can see that nice setup in the hall space. And we had lots of speakers that came to speak at Memorial Hall. This one is Teddy Roosevelt came here in 1918 for to speak. Well, he was invited first to speak at Wittenberg because Harry Kissel invited him because sentiment against German-born or German descendants was high due to the war. So he came and he spoke about that, and they wanted him to speak specifically at Wittenberg because of its ties to German background. And he spoke at Wittenberg first. He also spoke downtown at the Esplanade, and he spoke at Memorial Hall, all to big crowds. We also have people that campaign coming through town. This is Warren G. Harding a few years later, campaigning outside Memorial Hall. We have some other events that I've run across in the archives that I honestly knew this was in the collection, but had not run across it until I was putting this together. But it also ties in with other photos we know that we have in the collection to show that we do know that there's photos of a Klan rally that was somewhere in the county in 1923 is how the photo was I always identified. But then I ran across this photo showing that they actually had a public meeting in Memorial Hall, and ran across this photo, which we have the date. So I'll definitely go get more information about that. But that's one I just ran across today in a set of photos that we had that we hadn't pulled up and scanned for before when we had scanned other pictures of Memorial Hall and events. That this was filed in with the associations where we have stuff from them, and I hadn't thought to look there. So definitely need to do a little more research on this. Other things that went on there, we have these pictures from 1950. There was a Clark County Health Fair that was held there, and the different pharmacies in town helped put together these displays to show how pharmacies had changed over time. So they had this great display back here behind these guys, and you can see, you know, they had set up a turn of the century pharmacy. And this came from our George McCann's collection associated with the, forgot their name, on High Street. The pharmacy over there had these photos with it. So they were at Walpole.
Fire Road McCann is what you're.
Fire Road and McCann. I couldn't think of the word before McCann. Thank you. A lot of people remember going to see wrestling at Memorial Hall, and we know that it actually has a long history. Most of the photos we have are from the 40s and 50s. A lot of people's memories are from later. And people have talked to me about different wrestlers that they remember that we don't have photos of. So we have, I know this one here is Wild Bill Zimovich. One of his descendants had contacted us and knew that we had these photos in our collection. And was doing research on him, but we've got pictures of him here with the referee and the promoter. And we have a map of the layout that they used for wrestling and boxing there. But there was lots of professional wrestlers that came to Memorial Hall in the 40s and 50s, and then later in the 80s. And maybe in between, you guys can let me know what other years they were here. But there were notables like Lord Lansdowne, who had a lounge and bar here in town. I've got a picture of him on another screen. He's an interesting character. Don Eagle, Bobo Brazil, Chief White Owl, Gene, Mr. America, Stanley, Prince Alaki, Big Jim Grabmeyer, which a lot of people tell me about, that he had a great grill in town. We don't have a picture of him, unfortunately. And Gorgeous George. It continued into the 80s, and the WWE came to town later. We've got some stuff from the 80s there. So in this slide, we've got a few more pictures. We've got Tuffy Cleat, John Demschek. This is Lord Lansdowne, who liked to play he wore a cape and a top hat and a monocle. So he was one of those first glamour wrestlers. And we've got Don Vansky, Jim Londos. And we've had some people donate some films that they had of people wrestling as well. This was one that I ran across that Andre the Giant was here in 1984. So I thought that was pretty cool. He's one that I've heard of, a big time wrestler. So we also have, we know that boxing was here. They had boxing championships here in the 40s. But This is what I was talking about. What we have an entire box of all the programs that we've collected over the years, and that people have donated from different programs and shows and things, performances that were Memorial Hall. But as you can see, it's in chronological order. We stopped pretty much in the 50s, and then we do have something from when Johnny Lytle played with Carl Jordan in 1973. But a lot of our stuff is from from when they first opened. We've got a copy of the Cornerstone in there, but then early stuff, 20s, 30s, and 40s. So we would love to find more things to represent later years of Memorial Hall. But what it was built for, why it was Memorial Hall, was for the veterans. So we've got some pictures of veterans here. This was a undated photo, but clearly much later. I recognize Roger Tackett here in this picture. You guys can shout out if you recognize other people, but you see they're representing the wide span of veterans that are being honored, reenacting different eras. But then actual real era photos we have are members of the GAR in an undated photo, but we know I was able to pick this guy out here. His name is suddenly escaping me at the moment. Oh, H.E. Titus. He was a member of the regiment that brought back the cannon to Springfield, which a lot of people remember seeing outside Memorial Hall. So we know he's standing here on the far left in the photo. And then this picture here shows the surviving members of the GAR. It's an undated photo, but you can see, the ladies in the background. So this is probably the teens, 20s, but a large group gathered there. The Mitchell Post, number 45 of the GAR at Memorial Hall. And they had their offices there, which if Roger's on here, he can, that's why when we moved into this building, that the veterans offices are part of this building. That was part of the agreement to still keep that connection and have that space for veterans offices, which was for so long at Memorial Hall. But the building had a great significance to us because we spent about 60 years there. We found this article, Casey must have found it's her handwriting on the article from when we opened on May 1926. Says historical museum to open Civic Week. As we were making preparations to move into Memorial Hall, we had moved from the county building, the East County building, where the juvenile court stands, where we had been for a number of years, and we moved over to Memorial Hall. So these are some pictures that show some of the exhibits that were there, which a lot of people remember going to Memorial Hall to see the exhibits. So I know I personally love looking at these because I recognize a lot of the artifacts in here as things we still have in the museum, or things I know that I know where they are in storage. It makes me feel really good knowing that we're still keeping those things. Like this is the Liberty whistle that was blown to announce the end of World War I, and it was made by the Trump Manufacturing Company. If you believe that story, there's also the story that the Bauer company was the first to blow the whistle, and for a while we had that whistle as well, but it was lent to announce the end of World War II, and then never made it back here. So there's some great pieces in there. I think the spinning wheel and the spindle you can see out on the second floor in the museum, and then over here you've got down the hallway, one of the hallways in Memorial Hall. This is that model bridge of the bridge that was on Route 40 that was taken down in the 20s, and then they used the pieces of the bridge to make the model. We have that on display in the museum still today. So it's really neat to go pick out those little pieces. This is the clock that you can see in our first case when you come into the museum now, grandfather clock. So it's fun to go look through this and pick those things out, but to see, to feel grateful that we do have a little bit more space for our displays now. You can see we had kind of everything out and just in and around. So you know that here we've had more space. Some pictures outside that a lot of people remember seeing the cannon out there, and you can see a couple different views of the cannon. You can see here, they've got a different carriage on it. The wheels were not on this part, and over here we still have the wheels. And but to talk a little bit more about the cannon, by 1984, the framework had rotted. We know that when it first came back with H.E. Titus's regiment, he's shown here with the cannon and another member of that regiment. When it first came back from the Civil War, it spent a number of years out at Ferncliff at the Soldiers Mound, and then it eventually made its way to Memorial Hall, which someday we'll run across that exact date. I've never found that yet. Maybe Casey has or someone else, but I'm not sure exactly when it started being displayed in front of Memorial Hall. But we know that by 1984, the framework had rotted, and they estimated that restoration work would cost between $4,000 and $6,000. But Blair Getz of CNN Contractors and Mark Brown from PK Lumber, shown here, volunteered to refurbish the cannon and pay for the cost. They consulted with the Clark County Historical Society at that time, and they disassembled it and sandblasted away many coats of paint that had done over the years as they added to it, and they applied coatings to keep it from rusting. And then it was put back out. So this is shown sometime late 1984, early 1985 when they put that back out there. And it ended up only costing about under $2,000 for them to do that restoration work. And today you can see that same cannon, which has had some refurbishment again before it came into the Heritage Center when it opened in 2001. But it was that restoration work was sponsored by the Springfield High School class of 1943. So you can see that up on the second floor in the museum. So it's still here. But this is where we get into the part where things started to really go downhill at Memorial Hall, which led to it eventually sitting. We know that in the 70s they had a number of years of deficits. They had several years in a row where they had over $20,000 deficit, and they knew that at that time repair work was estimated to be between around $40,000 for various things. We know that the county commissioners were trying to entice the county and city recreation departments to make use of the building for programs, but they knew that that was where they'd come up with the $40,000 number that would take to repair, so that they would be able to do those sorts of events in there at that time. The manager at the time had the rates had stayed the same since the mid 60s into the late 70s. So I talked about raising the rates to see if that might help, and they ended up hiring a new manager in the late 70s to try and up the programming and find new ways to raise revenue. They considered doing bingo there, which I didn't see it. If anyone remembers if they ever did do bingo there. They brought back wrestling more often and started to be once a month, and they would have it more times a month. They looked at getting a liquor license, and that would help. And then they did eventually raise the rates by the late 70s. We know that in 1980, the new manager was able to decrease the cost. They were still using full heat, but they were able to have the cost by finding a new supplier. And they booked some large acts. They brought wrestling back, had it twice a month. They had B.B. King here that year, and then the symphony orchestra was still doing their regular schedule. So they were trying to beef it up. So they went from about 30 some bookings in 1979 to almost double that in 1980. So things were starting to really look up. We know that in the 80s, early 80s, the Historical Society began looking at how to renovate the building to do more with the museum. And at that time, the cost for renovation was estimated to be $5.4 million to renovate, or $11 to $15 million to build a new building along the same lines. We know the events coordinator in the early 80s was looking into it being a smaller convention center just to bring conventions to town. And in 1984 was the first time that they put an issue on the ballot to do renovations on the building. And we know that it was supported by the League of Women Voters, who led tours of the building just prior to the ballot issue. And they said at the time that it would have cost $7.4 million to remove the building. So, you know, they were showing that it was more cost effective at that time to try and do more with it and repair it before it got too bad. But unfortunately, that May 1984 levy failed. By about 4,000 votes. And the county commissioner, Merle Grace Kearns, who was always such a great supporter of the Historical Society, she was shocked. She said, she's quoted being shocked because it had been shown to be winning pretty fairly in the polls. But that levy would have brought new heating, electrical, plumbing, a new roof, insulation, new seating, air conditioning, kitchen area. They would have fixed problems in the balconies, added new dressing room, stage expansion, more parking, floor and elevator repair, and installation of new stage equipment. So it was a huge project. So it won on the ballot again in 1985 in May. And there was this flyer here, I'm not sure what this one was undated, but we see that Charlie Fox was the chair on this one at this point. And we know that in another effort in people that supported were City Commissioner Dale Henry and County Commissioner Roger Tackett were a big part of the committees then at that time. So the levy was put back on the ballot in 1985 and failed that May. And then in 1985, they closed and padlocked the building. So that meant that the Springfield Symphony Orchestra no longer had a home, and we no longer had a home, and the Veterans offices no longer had a home. So we've talked about this. We had our anniversary program on March 31st, where I talked about where we pursued our Museum Without Walls for about 15 years when we were spread out between Thompson Avenue. Things remained in Memorial Hall, and just escaped me the name. Oh, we were also at on Fountain in 818 North Fountain. So Virginia, it came in after we had left the building, but we're still in the late 80s, but when we still needed to get items out of Memorial Hall eventually. So we know that there was other attempts. This is from 1991. This was another proposed plan and levy attempt. We knew that by that point, the building had sat since 1985 without heat or any repairs or anything. So that meant that the cost had gone up to stabilize it. But by 1991, we were one of only 11 memorial halls left in Ohio. And that was a lot of the push. We have this, the Historical Society's director at that time, Floyd Barman, had drawn up these plans for what a museum would look like there. And at this point, we were without a place at all. So, you know, they had drawn up all these plans for new galleries and collection storage. And the proposal would have had veteran space and a 15,000 square foot addition to the north of the building for conservation and storage for the Historical Society. And that proposal was 8.5 million. And it was proposed to start in 1992 to be completed by 1994. And that was to be a November 1991 ballot issue. So there was the Save a Memorial Committee, which had been going since 1980. I don't know if 84 they called it Save a Memorial, but I know in 85 they had were calling it the Save a Memorial Committee. But there was petition drive to get people to sign, collect signatures for this. And they were hoping that the patriotism that was a big push due to American involvement in the Gulf War was high. So they were hoping again, you know, to keep this memorial hall that was made for veterans. We know that they had a rally for support troops in front of the hall to help bolster support for saving it. And that they hoped that with the passage of the levy, they would start a 10-year program that would eventually have us in a new building at the Centennial of Springfield in 2001. So we know that one failed as well. But as I talked about a couple weeks ago, for our anniversary of the Heritage Center building, we were very fortunate to make that the possibility of having a permanent museum work in another historic building. This building is older than Memorial Hall. But I was amazed just going through this that to realize that the plan then was, the dream was we would have something open in 2001, and we still managed to pull it off in this beautiful building that now that we call the Heritage Center. So I'm glad that sad to go through that box myself to see, this was not part of my history or my memory, but to go back through and see how all of those attempts to save the building and create a beautiful space for Clark County's history didn't work in that instance, but it ended up working for us here. The interesting thing, if anyone remembers 1985, there was 4 issues on the ballot. Issues 1, 2, 3, and 4, they were all part of civic improvement to renovate Memorial Hall, to build a new civic center, to do renovation at the fairgrounds, and to build a new Warder library, all of which have happened now, but not necessarily in the time frame that was originally planned for any of it. So, you show here Merle Kern's support of that to be a levy in 1991 as well. So a lot of you may know that how things went. I don't have any pictures of the years in between to represent that, but we know that in the late 90s, 96, 97, that they solicited bids to sell the building, and the minimum bid at that time was $20,000. No one bid, and there was no winning bids in 96. There was a bid in 1997 that ended up falling through because someone had bought it to use for ministry, but then weren't able to pay the balance. And then it ended up selling in February 1998 to a man that owned several mobile home parks and thought about eventually turning it into commercial space. We know that in 2007, there was a condition assessment that was done on the building, and we've got that in the archives as well, that shows all of the brickwork that was poorly damaged and all of the roof damage and everything in it. By that point, the cost to renovate and restore had gotten to 12 to 15 million. So as it sat and sat and sat, the cost just rose. So this is, these sad pictures are from 2009, when Healthy City Investments, which was a partnership between Community Mercy Health Partners and the Turner Foundation, had bought the building. And their plan, after doing the condition assessments and looking at the cost, was to save what they could. To save what they could from the facade, to save what they could from the interior, and to reuse it in future buildings, which is what ended up happening. And we were happy to be a part of making that possible by helping store some of those pieces in our building after the building came down. But we know that in 2009, when they were still discussing the plans, we had there was a public forum that was the Springfield Preservation Alliance hosted here at the Heritage Center, that had more than 50 people come to express their concerns, share their love and their memories about Memorial Hall, and talk about its future and what could be done. At that point, it was pretty clear that there wasn't a whole lot that could be done to save it. There weren't people willing to put in all the money that it would have taken, but there was definitely possibility of saving bits and pieces of it. So demolition work began in the fall of 2010, I believe. I know that they were working on it by September of that year. So we've got some pictures showing them setting up around the outside. And this is a great picture showing the stage, but it's a very sad picture. Showing after, this is right towards the end, but I know that like a lot of the buildings that we've seen come down, especially in the last 10, 15 years, people in town have been documenting them very studiously, daily, sharing them online. So I love to see that history being documented that way. It's sad, but it's another part of, the cycle of how things go. And, we have that documented for the future, and we have the pictures from before as well to save that history. But that wasn't the end of the story. And what sparked this was the 10-year anniversary of the day that we got a call from Tony Smith Wrecking on April 1st. We thought it was an April Fool's joke because they called and they said, we are clearing the site for Memorial Hall. And this is in 2011. And they said, we found something. We think it's a time capsule. And I had answered the phone and I said, you're joking, right? And they said, no, but can we bring it over? And I said, yeah, bring it over. So this is the day that they brought it to us, April 1st. We had this guy here, poor guy, I can't remember his name, but it was his first day there. He was a student. It was just starting with us. And this was a newer volunteer, Judy, and one of our interns, Pam. We're all there it was a very, very exciting day. And what happened was the time capsule was found by one of their backhoes clearing the site. So it was cut nearly completely in half. So you can see this is the box here that was copper lined. And we found as we took things out that aside from it being cut in half, everything was in amazing, perfect condition. Casey and Virginia probably remember that clearly. We were taking everything out, and every newspaper, every magazine, every piece of paper looked brand new, like the day it had been put in there. So it was sealed very, very well. But you can see we've spread out everything all over the table as we're pulling everything out. It was like Christmas. We were so excited to find everything in there and have it all out on the table. There was lots of books and locally published magazines, and all of the rosters of local military companies from all throughout history were rolled up in a metal canister that unfortunately was split right in half, but we could piece it back together. So this was definitely some preservation work that went into this once we got the box. But you can see this giant Abraham Lincoln penny is very neatly bent by that, and the flag that was in there that was over top of everything was stuck to the top of the so we didn't want to tear that. We displayed that with it. But this is everything from that day. But then later that year, we were able to put together an exhibit so we could show everybody everything that was in the time capsule. So we had this in the lobby, and we still have it available if people want to look at it. Want to look at the contents in the archives and in the collections area. But we had cases showing, the publications that were there. You could see stuff that we pieced back together as much as we could. This was J. Warren Pfeiffer's speech that he gave. There was a copy of that in there, cut right down the side there, but you could line it back up. So we encapsulated a lot of things to help hold them together and care for those. But we had panels on events and things that to give people the history of Memorial Hall and show pictures that we had. And we had all the little knickknacks and medals and buttons and things that we found in there too on display. So that was nice to be able to display that. And we had, and for years after that, I always felt bad that we didn't realize that we should be looking for a time capsule, and that we had, failed and something that we could have salvaged, that we should have thought, say, oh, look for it. And we had someone come in a few years ago that had been closely following the demolition, and he had been there on a regular basis, taking pictures and talking to the people that were part of the demolition crew. And he had found information about the time capsule being placed in 1915. And he told them, there's a time capsule, be careful, it's probably around here. And he had gone off, to take a break or had, I think he was a student, he had class or something. And when he came back, they had already demolished the part that he suspected might hold the time capsule. And they were, hosing it down, and it was done. And he said, oh, well, I guess it wasn't there. We didn't get it. So hearing his story and knowing that he had tried and they had known to maybe look for it made me feel a little better to know that, they had, that it still maybe was destined to happen. But I'm glad that they stopped, realized what they had hit. They could have just kept going and broken the whole thing apart. So we're very grateful that they realized what they had and brought it to us. It's a great piece of history. And another way that we're able to preserve this history for future generations is this was a Clark State project. There was a student that came to us that was doing a 3D modeling class. And he said, I really want to make a 3D model of a building that people really love, that maybe isn't here anymore. Can you think of anything? And I said, oh, well, definitely Memorial Hall. And I think that was when we pulled out the blueprints. So we do know we have some of those, we gave them, copies of blueprints, and every photo we had from every angle we do have a lot of pictures from around the building, and anything that we have that could help him recreate the building as much as he could. So he's then donated this 3D model back to us after he was finished with his project. So we're grateful to have that as well. But there's some pieces that live on. The doors and surrounds were saved, a lot of them, the lights. Some of those we still have in the collection here at the Heritage Center in our building. We have some of the seats from there, and I know that I couldn't find a picture of this in use, but if you've been in United Senior Services new building, you know that one of their meeting rooms has the old ticket booths and surrounds, and I think some of the stained glass in that room. So that was reused there. So that plan to, save what we could and reuse it, that was realized. So you can see here, this was the site for quite a while as they had the columns cut down. But those columns shown here have found new life and are on the bridge on Fountain that goes over Buck Creek outside Veterans Park, that park. So I'm happy that could be realized, because that had been the plan to use those in town. And the eagle that had been on top is now atop the ice rink. And I know that for a while this article talks about that the ice rink site was going to be where Memorial Hall was. That was the initial talks with National Trail Parks and Recreation District, but they ended up doing it across the street. And if you know now, the site where Memorial Hall was sold to a corporation in 2016, that there's now a Wendy's on that site. But I didn't want to end with that. I wanted to end with another happy picture, one of my favorite pictures of the building. Our favorite images of the building with this postcard here. But I'd really love to hear from you guys your memories of Memorial Hall, what you remember going to see there. And I'll share, you can share afterwards if you think of anything that you want me to know, or anything I got wrong that you want to correct. Happy to correct it. I'm happy to put it in the notes with this video if we have anything that we need to add, but the emails here on clarkcountyhistory@gmail.com. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here so I can hear from you guys. So I want you guys to tell me what's one of your favorite shows that you remember seeing at Memorial Hall.
I have a story if you want to hear it.
I do, Connie.
I played in the orchestra at Springfield High School. I had a very short not very budding, I should say, musical career, but I loved the Springfield Symphony. And I thought that being in the Springfield High Orchestra was just going to be the best. And so I was a sophomore in high school. It was 1959. Dave and I had never met, although I knew who he was. I used to see him from my little cubby where my locker was when I was going to Springfield High School. But I played in the orchestra at his graduation from high school. So we hadn't met yet. I knew who he was when he walked across the stage, because I'd eyed him several times over the course of the year that I was there when he was there. So I thought that was kind of cool. I loved being in the orchestra that played for his graduation.
I know a lot of people had their graduations there. Did any of you guys graduate at Memorial Hall?
Yes, I did.
So you were at Springfield High, right, Virginia?
Yes. I also attended the Ohio State Susque, now I can't say it, 150 years, say it for me.
Okay.
They had a program down at Memorial Hall, and some of us, I don't know why I was chosen. I was, there was a few of us chosen from the class to go down for that program, and the place was pretty full. So I guess I was, I don't know, maybe early teens or long about that.
Well, I know I wanted to share an article here that I ran across looking at stuff that Tom Stafford had done right after it was torn down in 2010. He had solicited people's memories and had written an article about it. So I've got that in the chat. But one thing, I was talking to Virginia today and other volunteers that were here today while I was working on this, about how depressing going through that box was to see all of those efforts to save the building. And it's the same thing when you look at the arcade box and everything. And it makes me so grateful that we are in a building that was able to be saved, especially since we're, older than any of those buildings, over 130 years old this year. And it's makes me grateful that people have supported us, and because it shows, those levee failures with a Memorial Hall were what did it in. So, I mean, there was really, as you let it go, and you let it go, these old buildings, that there's really it's harder to come back, and it becomes more and more expensive to maintain them. So we're grateful that we have a levy now that people have supported, that allow us to do, a lot of the big work around the building with the roof and the HVAC system and all the things that, when you see the original plan for Memorial Hall, that they had all of those things that they needed to fix to make it work, that it's a shame that it couldn't have been kept up more. The expenses were too great. So we're grateful that to have that support, because it makes you realize just how easy it could go the other way. So we're grateful for you guys and all your support and everybody in the community. So to make a plan that, to get a plan that did work, to get us into this building. So thank you for that.
Natalie, I've got a few memories of Memorial Hall. It's like went to elementary school, went to school in the county, and I can remember the parking lot at Memorial Hall being full of school buses, because that was one of the field days we went in, and on occasion the Springfield Symphony played for all of us, and that was my introduction to symphonic music. So that was really great. And to stick with the music theme, I can remember Battle of the Bands when I was a teenager, being held at Memorial Hall, and that was great. And I attended wrestling. I had an aunt who was an avid wrestling fan, and we used to go and watch all the big stars wrestle at Memorial Hall.
When was that, Terry, that you remember going to see wrestling?
Probably the early 60s.
Okay. So that's a time period we don't have any record of, and everything stops after the 50s. The shows and stuff that we have programs and pictures of. So I would love to find that stuff in the community. I heard Roger today was telling me he saw a wild cherry there, and him and another person said they saw Seals and Crofts. So those are later. We know B.B. King was there in 1980. And Johnny Lytle played there in the 70s, and I think he played there later as well. So
I don't think I saw any of the big rock bands there. The Battle of the Bands were the local bands from Springfield. And Pleasant Street Blues Band comes to mind. They're still around and still playing. So
yeah.
they're a bunch of little farts like I am, but they can still play. One of the funnier memories I have of Memorial Hall is it was also my introduction to ballet, and unfortunately, I completely embarrassed my girlfriend because I laughed out loud when one of the ballerinas jumped directly out of her tutu and kicked it behind the curtain. And I think everyone saw it, but I was the only one that was laughing.
I was just going to say, Terry, that I went to see Swan Lake, and I think I would have been about 5 or 6. So that would be late 50s.
Yeah, it was a great venue. I really enjoyed my trips to.
Natalie?
Yeah.
I also went to see Tiny Tim.
Oh, really?
He was there. It had to have been 82 or 83. And it was just a hoot, but that was when he was so popular. Everybody knew about Tiny Tim and all that. So anyway, I saw him down there.
Was Miss
I-
Vicky with him?
Pardon?
Is Miss Vicky?
I don't remember her being on stage anyway, but
I think I need to make, I know Bob and Flossie, I don't think they made it on this call, but Bob always goes through the papers looking for things. I'll have to have him in the future when he just goes through random years every once in a while. I'll have to tell him to start looking out for more for Memorial Hall stuff so we can start making a better comprehensive list of things that have been at Memorial Hall. Because I know they were always advertised in the papers throughout all the decades that they were open. So we need to make a more concerted effort to record some of that.
Natalie?
Yeah.
We grew up on the corner of Cedar and Race, so we were only 5 or 6 blocks from Memorial Hall, and we had a big family. So my brothers and I would roam around the neighborhood, and we'd stop at the Coca-Cola plant and look at the bottles filled up through the big plate glass window in front. And then we'd head up to Memorial Hall and just roam around those hallways and just love seeing all those artifacts. This was late 50s, so we were probably only anywhere from 10, 11 years old. And it was just real fun remembrance of the artifacts being displayed. But then my best friend that I played baseball with, his Grandma Watson, was in charge of the concession stand for the wrestlers. So we would go in a couple hours before the matches started and help her. And we'd get to see all the wrestlers come in, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers and Chief Wadow and Don Eagle and all of them. And they'd come in laughing and carrying on together. And then they'd get in the ring and act like they were mortal enemies. But there was...
That wasn't acting. It was a great show. I don't care what it was.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, I grew up about a block and a half from you on North Yellow Spring Street,
Oh,
right
okay.
off of Cedar Street. So we used to walk up there too. Maybe you remember some of the sock hops at the Memorial Hall that they used to have. And one year they had the Big Bopper and a whole lot of those guys that got killed in plane crashes. But they were all there, those big names, and they all
really?
performed and we danced. Well, I'm pretty old. I graduated from high school in '61, but I grew up not very far from you. In fact, I fell off my bicycle right on the corner by where you lived. It was
Well, now that was in front of Art's Tavern, so that didn't have anything to do with it, did it?
I don't think so. I probably was about 10 years old. Not at that point, anyway.
Hi, Natalie. I'm Randall Setti. My story at Memorial Hall starts in elementary school. We were bused there from Highlands to attend the symphony as little kids, and we were bored to death with the music, but it was getting out of class and riding a bus. Then probably about 5th grade, we got bused down to the museum to go through it. The narrow hallways, you could have probably 2 or 3 people abreast as you walk down through. And again, we were bored to tears about the museum, but it was out of school and on a bus ride. The Boy Scouts used to rent the Memorial Hall to have their once or twice a year functions there, and I went to those. By 1973, Northwestern High School rented Memorial Hall to graduate from. I was not quite as bored then. I was very happy to be graduating at that time. A friend of mine, Mark Miller, who was also a Northwestern graduate, was managing, I believe, or running Memorial Hall for several years. His story he told me about wrestling was Andre the Giant had come in with some of the wrestlers. Mark was down in the bottom, what they called the dressing rooms, which was just brick rooms, no doors, dark, dingy brick rooms. He said he went in one room, he turned on the light, it was pitch dark, he turned on the light, and there lays Andre the Giant on 2 4x8 tables, sound asleep. I said, did you go over and wake him up? He said, no. Apparently, Andre the Giant, he would come in to wrestle. He would take a nap in the afternoon because he was so big. And Mark had wandered into a room and found him laying there, and didn't know whether he was alive or dead, but he didn't poke him to find out. Then later on in the 80s, also the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band came and played there at Memorial Hall. And through my business, I was kind of a co-donating sponsor. So I got backstage and got back downstairs again to the dressing room and got to see the room full of people from the stage, which was quite nice. And then, of course, the hall closed. But yeah, it seems like for 50, 60 years, I have memories from all age in there in different times.
That's great. I'll have to ask Mark about that. I saw that he was managing it in the mid 80s. And I had not realized that until I ran across that bit today. And I said, oh, I'll have to ask him some stories about what he was managing there. So
yes.
But I'm glad that, everybody has these memories. I know, I hope my kids, I think, will probably grow up with similar memories of going to things at the Kuss. So I'm glad that there is still a civic center in town that they can go see shows like that, and everything. So, it is very much a necessity to have in a community, I think. So, even though the efforts to save that one didn't necessarily work, I'm glad there's other things for people to do that, because it shows, that it's such a powerful memory for people to have throughout their lives. So we hope that those people still make those memories here in town. And Casey's shared some links in the chat here of how you can donate to us on Facebook or on our website. But I also we have a link to our YouTube channel, which is where this recording will be later. And all of the recordings from our past programs are all up there now. We're finally caught up. I had them all on Facebook, but we hadn't got them all caught up on YouTube before. But we have everything on there now if you want to check out any of those past programs that we've done. But if anyone out there has anything from things that they did at Memorial Hall that they're hanging on to, programs or whatever, we'd be happy to have them. Or if you know anybody that's got stuff, I'd love to fill in those gaps in between, but we'll probably have to do that through newspaper research and things like that. So that may be something we do in the future. But anybody have any other stories they want to share or anything they want to say?
Natalie, the scout programs he was talking about, they had back in the late 40s and the 50s, all of the scout jamborees there.
Oh.
They built teepees and all kinds of stuff. And we had a couple of years there because of the bad weather, we had the circus in the downtown area. And the circus, instead of going to the fairgrounds, it came to Memorial Hall.
Oh, did they have to shrink it down to do a Memorial Hall and do less? Did they have elephants in?
Well, they had the animals outside and all.
Oh, okay.
All the tent displays, performers there were in the.
I had seen something about the Hannaford Circus had been there. We do have something about them and other things, but so.
We had a great time at the jamborees in the 50s. And as Connie said, I graduated there in 59. I was in the last graduating class for old Springfield High.
Are you done?
Yep, I'm done.
Oh, well, thanks, David. Oh, Susan, did you want to unmute? Or were you trying to say something? There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Okay. Back in the 70s, I remember going there. A group of us would get together. We'd get all dressed up in long dresses to the symphony. We went to the Springfield Symphony when they were housed there. And I remember we would go up and sit in the balcony close to the orchestra so you could look down and watch the ones playing. And that was a big event for us. So we wear long dresses and stuff. And then I remember after that, we would go to a restaurant called, I think it was called Jerry's. that was on down the street. It was similar to a Frisch's, and we'd always have a little dessert. So that was like a big night out for us. I don't remember going there too much for other things, but I do remember that was a big deal in my teenage years. So, I just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. I see Sue's still around. I'm curious. I saw you on here. I know you've done a lot of the pictures and collecting of things of buildings that are being torn down. Did you manage to get anything from Memorial Hall? Or were you photographing that? See if she might not be at her computer. But she's always been really great about bringing stuff to us. So, and Casey, I can't remember if we got anything after it was torn down. I think a lot of the pieces and everything we got that we stored, and we still have some of that came down before the actual big demo work happened. And then as they continue to work on different projects, you know, the United Senior Services new building and the ice rink, they would come get those pieces and things that they needed to use. Glad that it could be used. Well, if nobody has any other stories to share, you're welcome to jump in if you have anything, but I'm happy you guys were here to listen and share. And if you think of anything else or know anything else about the building that we should know, let us know. Oh, I see Sue said she didn't start until community hospital was coming down. So sure her documenting of things coming down in town. So that's an important part of documenting history too, is to get the aftermath and get things as they're coming down or right before they come down. So we appreciate that too, to have those records. So thank you guys all for being here tonight. Our next program, Casey, if you want to, we can talk a little about that. We'll be with Virginia Wigan. She's gonna.
We don't really have a precise format yet, but the 28th, is it?
Mm-hmm. April 28th, so 2 weeks from today. Virginia's gonna come back and she'll be able to
take her final bow as as director of collections here. So we're gonna talk about some highlights from her career. I know there's been a newspaper article and a radio piece on WYSO. If you haven't, there are links to those on our Facebook page.
Yeah, and
when we put the event up, those out,
we'll share those too. But yeah, well, you guys we're hoping to spread the word for people to come ask Virginia questions and chat with her, because she didn't get a proper send off or, you know, for her retirement in December, what like we would have liked to have given her. But we're hoping that we can do this and let her share some stories and memories and let people come share their love and chat with her too. So and spread the word about that. We'll be advertising that in the next couple of weeks.
Great job, Natalie and Casey.
Thank you. And thank you guys. And
We
hope you
enjoyed
guys,
it.
thanks. Well, you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.